Simply put, a relative clause, also sometimes called adjective clause, is an additional sentence within your main sentence that gives us more information about a certain object. Usually, they are introduced by who, which, or that. There are other options, but they aren't commonly reduced. For example, the company which is developing this software is really rich. Let's look at this example. The company is really rich is the main sentence, and which is developing this software is the clause. Then there is another example. The man who visits this pub every evening is a local star. The man is a local star is the main sentence, and who visits this pub every evening is the clause that gives us more information about that man. Also, you may substitute who and which here with the conjunction that. The company that is developing this software is really rich. Or the man that visits this pub every evening is a local star. So reducing and cutting everything is very common in English. There is a piece of grammar that explains how you should reduce relative clauses in complex sentences. Please bear in mind that when we just omit who, which, or that, it's not called the reduced relative clause. You can omit these words if they are followed by a subject. For example, the woman who we met in the park is the CEO of General Motors. Let's look at this clause, who we met in the park. After the conjunction who, we have the object we. So in this case, we can omit the word who without losing any sense of our sentence. The woman we met in the park is the CEO of General Motors. Let's look at another example. The woman who sold me this laptop didn't say it will freeze once every hour. In this case, we have the relative clause who sold me this laptop. And after who, after the conjunction, we don't have the object. After who, we have the verb sold. In this case, we can't omit who. The woman sold me this laptop didn't say it will freeze once every hour. It's impossible to say that. So in this case, who can be omitted. Anyway, these are not reduced relative clauses. These are just sentences where you omit who, which, or that. Now let's talk about actually reduced relative clauses. First of all, we omit who, which, or that. Also, we omit any auxiliary verbs if we have them in our clause, and then we change the form of the verb in the clause. We use ing form when the verb is initially active, and we use ed form or past participle when the verb is initially passive. That's easy. For example, a doctor is a person who cures people. We can reduce this sentence and say a doctor is a person curing people. So the relative clause is who cures people. In this case, we can omit who. We don't have any auxiliary verb, so we don't omit any auxiliary verb. And we have the verb cure, which is in active form. And in this case, we will use ing form in our reduced relative clause, which comes to a doctor is a person curing people. Let's look at another example. The building that was destroyed in the fire will be rebuilt. We have the relative clause that was destroyed in the fire. When we reduce this relative clause, we will omit that as a conjunction, and we will also omit was, because this is an auxiliary verb. And then we have passive verb destroyed, that was destroyed. And in this case, we will use the past participle from destroy in the reduced relative clause. The building destroyed in the fire will be rebuilt. Let's make quick examples with different tenses. Students who will take their exam tomorrow need high scores. Students taking their exam tomorrow need high scores. People who work as programmers usually get decent salaries. People working as programmers usually get decent salaries. I couldn't recognize the man who was sitting in the bar. I couldn't recognize the man sitting in the bar. Now let's make examples with passive verbs in clauses. The house which is owned by her parents is extremely old. The house owned by her parents is extremely old. The horror film that was shown last week was very scary. The horror film shown last week was very scary. The bank lost the money transfer that was sent yesterday. The bank lost the money transfer sent yesterday. In conversations, we usually use reduced clauses, while in writing, it's up to you to decide which form you want to use. It's pretty common to see non-reduced relative clauses in writing. Also, it's interesting that state verbs that usually avoid getting ing endings can still get ing ending in reduced relative clauses, and it may sound unusual. For example, anyone who wants to buy a new apartment in New York should be very rich. Anyone wanting to buy a new apartment in New York should be very rich. And one more thing, sometimes after we reduce a relative clause, we have only one word left in it, and it may also sound weird and be misleading for English learners. For example, the house that was demolished was 250 years old. The house demolished was 250 years old. Or, the man who is singing is pretty bad at music. The man singing is pretty bad at music. Of course, there are other ways to reduce and transform relative clauses, but they deserve another video.